Hello everyone, welcome back to another Project Gladiator weather forecast. Today I'll be covering the weather for July 17th of 2023. Before I continue in today's forecast, I do want to note that I am using new hardware. I am using a new microphone, so if you guys notice any difference or think it's worse or better than the previous microphones in previous videos, please leave a comment detailing your feedback about the microphone change. And as for the weather for today, there are two slight risks. One large one for the Ohio Valley into the Midwest and Central Plains for the majority of southern Ohio, all the way across Kentucky, southern Indiana, and southern Illinois, across western Tennessee for southern Missouri and northern Arkansas, as well as parts of eastern Oklahoma and northeastern Oklahoma or southeastern Kansas, as well as a slight risk for the northern plains for northern/central Nebraska into southwestern South Dakota and parts of northeastern Wyoming. This is all tied together by one big marginal risk. This is a huge area for severe weather development for today. There also is a secondary area for severe weather development for today. There is a marginal threat for southern Arizona that I probably won't cover too much in today's forecast, if not at all. As for our threats for today, we do have a 2% tornado threat for southern Missouri into parts of Kansas and Oklahoma and northern Arkansas. As for our wind threat, we do have a 15% for both slight risk areas, as well as a hatch significant region for the slight risk that's for the north central plains, so we can see the possibility of destructive winds today. As for our hail threat, we do have two 15% for either slight risk region, as well as a 5% for the marginal threat region, but not really all that much of a hail threat for the marginal threat further down south. However, both regions do have a hatch significant region, so we could see the possibility of large to very large hail for today for both the regions in particular. Taking a look at our pivotal weather model, starting off with our 500 millibars like we usually do, you can see starting off with both slight risk regions. I usually focus on one slight risk region at a time. However, this would be in play for both slight risk regions, but we might be able to split them down. You can see the jet stream is moving across in a wavelength pattern with a high pressure system for the southeast, which is kind of odd with that marginal threat being down there. I might touch on it a little bit in today's forecast. However, it is a little odd because there is a high pressure system for that current location. However, some very weak mid-level flow in the 30 knots might be able to trigger a marginal threat for southern Arizona. However, for both marginal threat locations, you can see that we do have a wavelength pattern. The strong mid-level flow is passing over both locations to trigger severe weather development. However, the north central plains slight risk region, you can see there is a little bit of lee trough ring in Canada, so that will help aid in severe weather development for the north central plains, as well as for both locations. Very strong mid-level flow would allow for the possibility of elongated hodographs and the possibility of some large to very large hail. And as for the 2% tornado threat, you can see that there is a little bit of a curvature here, so we could definitely see the possibility of some weak but definitely sufficient directional shear for a 2% tornado threat. But overall, the wavelength pattern across both slight risk regions will be the main triggering factor for severe weather development in both locations, except for the marginal threat further down south in the southwest. Taking a look at our dew points, starting off with the slight risk region for the Ohio Valley into the Midwest and Central Plains, you can see that we do have some fairly strong dew points in place across the entire slight risk region. We have dew points that are expected to be in the 60s, the upper 60s, as well as the low end into the mid 70s as well. With this extremely strong moisture in the atmosphere, we could definitely see the possibility of some fairly strong instability. Depending on our lapse rates, we could get at least up to the 3000s, possibly even higher if we have some stronger lapse rates. And then back towards the slight risk region for the north central plains, you see that we do have some fairly strong dew points in place as well. However, they are more so in the moderates instead of the extreme tropical dew points like in the Midwest and central plains. You can see that we do have dew points in the 50s, the upper 50s, as well as the 60s, the low 60s, and possibly the mid 60s as well. If we have strong lapse rates, we could see the possibility of some fairly strong instability as well, possibly getting up to Cape Bayous that do reach the upper moderates, possibly the 3000s if we have strong lapse rates. Taking a look at our lapse rates, starting off with the slight risk region for the Midwest, Central Plains, and the Ohio Valley, you can see that we do have some fairly strong lapse rates in place. Back towards the Midwest and the Central Plains, we don't really have all that strong lapse rates the further out east you go. In the Ohio region and Kentucky region, we are just getting up to the 6s, and they aren't really getting up to the 7s. However, back towards the Midwest and Central Plains again, we do have some fairly strong lapse rates in place. We have lapse rates that are getting up to the low and possibly the mid 7s as well. So we could definitely see the possibility of some fairly strong instability with the lapse rates and the dew points that we are given. And what this means in terms of hail and damaging winds, strong lapse rates could lead to the possibility of some fairly strong damaging winds, as well as the possibility of some very large hail. Strong lapse rates moves the optimal hail development layer further down to the ground, which will be easier to reach with a strong updraft from crazy strong instability. And then back towards the slight risk region for the north central plains, we do have some even stronger lapse rates in place. We have very steep lapse rates that are reaching the mid and upper 8s, as well as the low 9s, possibly getting up to the very close mid 9s. So we could definitely see the possibility of some fairly strong instability with the dew points that we are given, possibly getting up to those 3000s like I was stating in the upper moderates back towards this location. And what this means in terms of hail and damaging winds is strong lapse rates, extremely strong lapse rates, is going to lead to the possibility of some very destructive winds with very strong cape values in place, and the possibility of very strong lapse rates. And what this means in terms of hail, we could definitely see the possibility of some large hail with moderate instability, possibly upper moderate instability with the lapse rates and dew points that we are given. That again moves the optimal hail development layer further down to the ground. It's going to be closer down to the ground more so than further out in the Midwest and Central Plains with that slight risk region, because there are stronger lapse rates in this region. So that's going to move the hail development layer further down to the ground and will be much easier to reach with a strong updraft from crazy strong instability. Taking a look at our instability, starting off with the slight risk region for the Midwest, the Central Plains, and the Ohio Valley, you can see that we do have very extreme amounts of instability back towards the Central Plains in the Midwest, more so back towards the Midwest and Central Plains than further out east. We do have much more moderate instability the further east you go. They are getting up to the low 4000s as well as the upper 3000s in Kentucky, but then into the moderates in Ohio and West Virginia. However, in the Midwest and Central Plains, you see that we do have, again, extreme amounts of instability, and along this entire slight risk region, that we are expected to have clusters of cells that develop that move south across the entire slight risk region. And back towards the Midwest and Central Plains, again, very strong instability is in place. So with very strong mid-level flow aloft and the possibility of some elongated hodographs, we could again definitely see the possibility of some large hail with the strong mid-level flow aloft and elongated hodographs and our strong lapse rates that are in place, as well as the possibility of some strong damaging winds, maybe not so much destructive with weaker lapse rates. However, again, this is very strong instability. So with whatever directional shear we have in that 2% tornado threat, we could definitely see the possibility of maybe 1 or 2 brief tornadoes, depending on our directional shear. And then back towards the slight risk region in the north central plains, we do have some overall weaker instability. However, it is still fairly strong. We have instability or cape values that are reaching the 1000s to the low 3000s range. So with this very strong lapse rates that we have in the strong mid-level flow aloft, we could definitely see the possibility of some large hail and the possibility of some destructive outflow gusts. So again, the possibility of large hail for both locations and the possibility of destructive outflow gusts for the north central plains slight risk threat. Taking a look at our bulk shear, I am primarily looking at bulk shear to focus more so on our speed shear than our directional shear. I do split those up in our storm relative helicity and our bulk shear. So right now I'm taking a look at our bulk shear and our different hail threats for both locations. So focusing on the slight risk region back towards the Ohio Valley, Midwest, and the Central Plains, you can see that we do have some fairly strong speed shear in place. Speed shear that is getting up to the 50 knots, the upper 50 knots, and possibly even the low 60 knots as well. That is going to allow for the possibility of some elongated hodographs and the possibility of some very large hail to large hail with strong mid-level flow aloft and our extreme amounts of instability. And then back towards the slight risk region for the north central plains, you can see that we do have some even stronger directional shear in place as well. That could be enhanced by the mountains in the lee troughing back towards the west. Mountains are in this region in particular, so mountains could allow for the possibility of some stronger speed shear as strong mid-level flow passes over this region. So it could definitely be increasing our speed shear back towards this location with the mountains. However, very strong speed shear in place, getting up to the 80 knots and even the 90 knots, possibly even the 110 knots in a very small location. It's going to be unlikely that we see widespread 100 knots. It's likely going to get up to the 80 knots, possibly even the 90 knots as well. So again, this is very strong speed shear, and we could definitely see the possibility of very long, elongated photographs and the possibility of some large to very large hail, possibly even gorilla hail for both locations as well. This is very strong speech here in place. So again, the possibility of large to very large and possibly even gorilla hail, the threat for that does stand in both locations. Taking a look at our storm relativity or our directional shear, focusing on the 2% tornado threat for southern Missouri into parts of northern Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. You can see the storm line is right here in Missouri and Illinois and Kansas. You can see that storm line here with some directional shear left in the wake of storm development. As that moves south, you can see what might be a little bit of a surprise. For that 2% tornado threat region, we are not seeing all that much of directional shear really at all. So this is going to be a fairly odd circumstance for that 2% tornado threat, and what the SPC is doing, I'm not really sure what they're doing with the 2% tornado threats lately. We did have that very odd placement of that 2% tornado threats either yesterday or a few days ago. They did a very odd placement with the 2% tornado threats, and now they're doing it again with the lack of directional shear in place to support tornadic development in that 2% tornado threat region. So I highly doubt with the directional shear that we have that we are going to get the possibility of one or two brief tornadoes. Even with the insane amounts of instability that we have, we need the directional shear for any type of tornadic development at all. So again, I do not know what's going on with this 2% tornado threat in the SPC. Again, I do not think that there's going to be all that much of a possibility for tornadic development. But again, take my word with a grain of salt because I am not a trained meteorologist. But again, however, as it seems so far, very weak directional shear and not at all in the 2% tornado threat region is going to lead to a very low potential for one or two brief tornadoes in that 2% tornado threat region, and it might not even happen. Now that I've told you the weather, please go down to the description and check out the socials for Project Gladiator and join the Discord for any updates on Project Gladiator. And I will be posting the weekly overlook probably very close or very soon after this forecast comes out. So be looking for that weekly overlook when it comes out. And if you live in any of the areas I covered for severe weather development for today, please stay weather alert for the time being, and hopefully I will be able to see you guys tomorrow with another forecast.